Comadres and okay, welcome, comadres and friends. I'm Nora de Hoyos Comstock, the national and international founder of Las Comadres para las Americas. The leadership team and I are pleased to have you join us for tonight's teleconference as we're beginning our 17th year. It has been our privilege to support Latino authors throughout these 17 years, and we look forward to many more to come. Would also like to extend a warm welcome to readers following us on our live Twitter chat at Read Latino Lit. Tonight, please help us welcome authors Ananda Lima and Daniel A. Olivas. Before we get started, a few housekeeping notes. Keep yourself on mute. You may keep your videos on, but some of us like to watch on gallery mode. So if you're moving a lot, it becomes a little bit distracting. Just remember that. We suggest you put yourself on speaker mode, but like I said, gallery works as well. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the chat and we'll try to get to them. But let's start with a little bit of book club history. Comadre Tess?
Buenas noches, comadres and friends. I am Tess Tobin, the project manager of Las Comadres and Friends National Latino Book Club. Our first book club gathering was in July 2004 in New York in Comadre Maria Ferrer's apartment. After a brief hiatus, Nora Comstock re-envisioned and relaunched the book club nationwide to promote the work of Latino authors to every book lover, to bring our community to bookstores, and to support our Latino writers. We started our teleconferences in October 2007. This year, we're celebrating our 17th year and are delighted to be sharing work by Latino authors with all of you. We created the teleconferences and book club to entice everyone to read more Latino authors and to learn about Latino roots and the different perspectives on Latino culture and heritage. Our book club and Zoom teleconferences are open to all, not just Latinos. We are creating a space for everyone to explore the Latino writer's mind and soul as portrayed through the written word. We encourage you to join our local book clubs in your city or time zone. Currently, we have clubs in 12 cities that are meeting virtually and some now in person. There is sure to be one that can fit your schedule. If your city doesn't have one, why not help us start one? For more information about our book club, visit our website at latinolit.com. So please invite others to join us. Comadre Karen?
Welcome, comadres and friends, to our October 2024 Zoom teleconference. I'm Karen Gonzalez, Assistant Coordinator for the Las Comadres and Friends Book Club, Denver Comadres Book Club Facilitator, and co-founder of the Colorado Alliance of Latino Mentors and Authors. Thank you for joining us tonight. Our first interview is with Ananda Lima, the author of Craft Stories I Wrote for the Devil and the poetry collection Motherland. Winner of the Hudson Prize, she has served as a mentor at the New York Foundation for the Arts, NYFA, Immigrant Artist Program, and currently serves as a contributing editor at Poets and Writers and program curator at Story Studio, Chicago. She has an MA in linguistics from UCLA and an MFA in creative writing and fiction from Rutgers University, Newark. Originally from Brazil, she lives in Chicago. Interviewing Ananda is Maria Ferrer, the executive director of Las Comadres para las Americas. Take it away, Comadre Maria.
Welcome, Ananda. Welcome, everyone. I have my
Thank
flowers
you so
ready.
much. I love them. They're so great.
Thank you. Thank you
I
for
like the
joining
yellow
us.
is going the bananas.
Yes, yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Your book is very beautiful. I love this cover. It is so
you.
different, so eye-catching. It's amazing. So, give us like a brief synopsis of your book for those people that are just starting it or have yet to pick it up. You know, we want them to pick it up. So just give us a brief synopsis to get us started.
Thank you so much. It's so great to be here, and I love everything about this. And thank you, Maria, for doing this. So, Craft Stories I Wrote for the Devil is a short story collection where the stories can be read individually, but they're actually part of a meta narrative of the writer of the stories. It was like a Brazilian lady with curly hair who wrote the stories. And she wrote them after she met the devil in her 20s, had a little thing with him. But she was young, those were different times. And she kept in touch with the devil throughout her life and was in communication with him as she wrote these stories that you read in the book.
Yes, yes, he keeps coming back. She keeps following him.
That's right.
Okay, so our first question is from our Colorado Book Club. They always have great questions. So they want to know what inspired you to write about the devil, and does this book have a Santeria influence?
I love it. So there were many things. One is that I feel like in Brazil, there's this cordel, there's a literature of cordel, which is this chapbook that people buy in fairs traditionally, like for a long time, they have done this. And they have poetry and stories and songs and sculptures too that people do after the woodcut prints that go into these books. And they often have the devil, and it's usually a little bit of a comic figure. It's drawn a little smaller than a human. So, the human will be this big and the devil will be a little smaller. So it's not super scary. And often the human is tricking the devil. Like the devil comes with the usual bargain, and then the human kind of takes the deal but finds a way to squeeze out of it, Um, so that was always in my mind, and it's always a very fun figure. As well as that, I was reading a lot of theory, like political theology, which is great stuff. It's like a very highly academic stuff. It's very, very interesting, but also puts you to sleep a lot because it's written in a very sort of like academic way. So it's good for both things. But I was reading about the history of the figure from medieval times to today, and sort of how that idea of this character changed, or how it was used historically by different groups. So all of that gave me a lot of interest in writing about this figure. But when I set to write, I sort of let all these things go. I knew they existed out there, and I wanted to invent my own devil, and that's how this devil came to be.
Because I did read somewhere that you were actually working on another book, but then you found that it wasn't fun, so you put it away and you
Yes,
started this one.
exactly,
The devil was more
exactly.
fun.
The devil was much more fun. That's right.
Now, explain to us, please, how a woman who is scary and is scared of horror movies writes a collection of horror stories. I mean, you got the devil, you got a ghost, you got a cannibal. I mean, you're scared of scary movies. You're scared of horror. What are you doing writing horror?
I know, I'm writing like this. No, I am very, very scared of horror. Like, I feel like when I was younger, I had this time when I was like, no, I have enough. I cannot watch any more movies because I have to leave the light on. I have to, if I go to the bathroom, I have to have somebody stand right there and talk to me. Otherwise, I'm too scared.
God, oh my
It's
God.
terrible. It's terrible. And I wrote these stories, and there's some that get pretty eerie. I think the machine one is the most scary, I think. But I didn't think I was writing horror because it's right in the edge. It's like between like literary magic realism, this stuff, and horror. And then when I saw the publishers sort of marketing materials, they had horror. And I thought it was so funny. I laughed so much, and I and I thought of telling my friends that, and they would find it so funny because I'm so scared. But in the end, I feel like all the darkness and heaviness of what was happening in the world got in there. Um, so so there's like a horror and there's some funny, and somehow that actually helped me face the bigger fears, or at least to find a way to talk about it. But now that I met a bunch of horror writers, I'm like, oh, I have to keep writing it because I like hanging out with them. So maybe it's not the end of the horror for me.
Yes. This is your horror era.
Exactly. It's my
This is your
horror.
horror hour. Now,
That's
you
right.
wanted to, so when you were reading all these theological arguments about the devil and the history about the devil, you let that all go and you just created your own. Pero what I found interesting about your devil is that he's sort of like a regular guy. You know, he's everywhere. He's at the bar, he's at the party, you know, he's at the airport, he's in the bookstore. I mean, he's just like a regular guy, maybe misunderstood. You know, we always pick on him, the poor darling and stuff. Pero también, I mean, there are instances where he flexes his power, you know, at the beginning where he, you know, where he tells you with Mike and I forgot her name now. With
Yeah,
Mike and the
the
girlfriend, you
writer,
know, and he
the
makes
writer.
them split up, and then with a
Oh,
flick
yeah,
of
yeah,
a
yeah,
finger,
yeah,
they're
yeah.
back together, you know?
Yes, Mike and
And then he
Angela.
does
Yeah.
these, you know, he turns it on and off at different parts. Pero you know, and then there's the part where he gives her the little flower. I mean, come on, a good guy gives you flowers, not the devil. So is
Right.
he like a lover, not a fighter? You know?
Yes, you know, when I started to write him, I knew he was gonna have a lot of regular guy features, but I didn't know if he was gonna be super evil or nice. I didn't know when I started writing. But then I started really liking him. So he started turning and especially liked him with the writer. So it kind of that's kind of how he came out. I let him surprise me. So I see him as being a little bit like a person in that he's not all good and not all bad, but certainly not as evil as the book as the regular devil, right? Um, and I also saw him as having some mysterious stuff that is off the page. So he is in the inauguration. He is doing these big things, but you don't know what he's doing there, you know?
Yes,
Um, right? So he may be doing some good or not good stuff off the page, but he does have this care for the writer, and ends up being sort of a positive in her life, you know. um
almost like a mentor, you know, like
exactly.
a muse, not a mentor, a muse. He's more
Exactly,
of a
that's right.
muse.
That's right. So yes, so I feel like I I I really like this character, and I feel like in this story we're seeing his good side for sure. Yeah.
Yes, you may have to write a book, you know, a sequel and just him, you know, stories of the devil.
Yes.
Um, so tell us why um the writer doesn't have a name. You know, you write about her and she's everywhere and you know, and she's always doing stuff. So it's not like she's in the background or anything. She's very active, pero she doesn't have a name. So she can be any woman or she could be no one.
That's right. That's
Or she
right. I
can be
love
this curly Brazilian woman, this curly Brazilian writer, you know? So why
exactly.
doesn't she have a name?
Exactly. I love these questions. They're so great. Thank you, Maria. So when I wrote the stories and when it started, the stories were doing this really fun thing that I really like, very meta, going into writers, writing about writers, etc. So when I made the meta frame, I wanted to get out and keep this going, kind of like the cover, you know, like layers and layers and layers, right? So I wanted this weird layers, meta layers that take you from the real world to this very fictional world. Um, and I wanted to be a little bit suggesting to outside the book. And I feel like the way the frame works, the way I wrote it, and part of it is calling the writer, helps with that. Because if I called it me, it would be too definite, and it too solid, right? So it doesn't sort of go both ways as easily. Calling it the writer, and there's some suggestions there, like there's a story that calls the writer Amanda, you know, and you
Yes,
don't
I
know if
saw
you're
that one.
right or wrong, right? Um, leaving it a little bit more open, I think makes that layer a little bit more porous, less solid. So it doesn't block between the inner stories and the outside of the book. So it's kind of part of that play. And I like how you said it. It could be anybody, right?
Yeah.
Who's a
Every
writer.
woman, no woman. Yes, yes.
Exactly. And there's suggestions there is somebody like the writer of this book, but it doesn't go all the way. So it leaves you more space for wonder,
Mhm. And is that also the reason why if you have the book is written like different narratives, different points of view, autofiction, narrative, all chaotic, but it all cohesive.
Right,
Did the
right. So
devil
it's
make you
like,
do it?
right, that's the question. So it's exactly so because there's this meta narrative of the writer that sort of keeps things together. It allowed me to do more play within each story, which is very fun for me to do the different modes and still have it be part of the same thing. um and then there's a lot of little references between the stories and within the stories and the frame, but I didn't make them super exact. Like the date that I start with the frame is different from the date in the story. So I think it's very similar to, like, as you pointed out so nicely, the writer. It's like indicating things there, but there's always a little openness there for people to wonder. Yeah.
I like one of the things that you mentioned in the book, and I know that it's about the immigrant story, because it's true, we do want to tell our stories, we want to tell about where we come from, what our background is. We want to include all that. But not every writer has to write an immigrant story, you know, and not every reader wants to read an immigrant story again. So in your book, you write, sometimes this immigrant writer talks about migration and wonders if she shouldn't. Sometimes she doesn't want to write an immigrant story and wonders if she should, you know? So do you feel a pressure, that you have to, because you're an author, you have to write an immigrant story, especially because you're not, an American Latino. You're Brazilian first. So is there pressure for you to write the immigrant story? Can't Latino authors write regular stories?
Right. I love that question too. So yeah, so I feel like there's an expectation, and I do think that at least in the workshop setting, it's a little bit better than it used to be like 10 years ago or something, Um, but there is this expectation of what the story will be, right? There will be I don't know, with Brazilian, there'll be that immigration narrative, there'll be home, there'll be the family, the food, the difficulties. Um, and I feel like there's an expectation, and maybe there's a box that you can jump in, right? That is already kind of there. But what is hard is that it's not just a matter of pushing against that, because I do like those things, and those things actually are part of things that I want to talk about. So then if you write it, you're like, oh, am I just doing what is this because of me? Is it because of the expectation? What is going on, right? Um, so what I liked about working on this book and having this meta layer is that, just like the passage you read, I could actually talk about it, which was really fun. And once I talked about it, I was just like, oh, now I can just write whatever I want. Um, so it
You
was
check the
really
box.
liberating. Exactly. Like here, it was really liberating because it's an interesting dilemma. It's bad that there's the expectation, but also I love reading those things and writing those things. So I thought that situation was interesting, and it was fun to be able to put that in the book. Um, and once it was there, I was like, oh, I have so much space. There's so much stuff that I can do. And I can write about immigrant things too, which was good. So there was a lot of negotiation with that there.
Yeah, because I also thought like another part, what, about the immigrant story is, like when you come to the US and stuff, um, people expect you to learn English, to learn our ways. You know, you have to become an American. If you want to fit in, you need to become an American. Okay. And I thought in a way in your story with the cannibal, you know, the woman who when she goes to the vending machine, I thought that was her way of, you know, her way of being an immigrant but becoming American because she eats all these American people. The little cowboy, the girl with the little hat, the rich woman with the purse, you know, the politician. I mean, she's eating all these little Americans, so she's becoming a little American.
Exactly. You are what you eat, right? They
Yes,
say
you are.
so.
That's right. You are what you eat. And this immigrant is becoming very much an American. She has an upset stomach, but you know, it's working.
It's true.
I wanted to ask you before you know, I have a couple of more questions, but I wanted to say, first of all, congratulations, in case anyone doesn't know. I heard that, you know, you are now on the long list for the 2025 Andrew Carnegie Medals for Excellence Awards from the American Library Association. Congratulations,
Thank you
congratulations.
so much.
So
Thank
what does
you.
this mean for your career? More money, more fame? What does it mean?
I don't really know, but it really feels really good. It's really lovely, and I think one thing that is just lovely because um, I love what Tor did with the horror classification. I think they were very smart, and I actually really like what they did. But I feel like this also helps reach other readers that go, "Oh, maybe I'm not sure if this is for me," and maybe reach other people that actually would be readers for this book too, which is really lovely. And it's just so great to get the recognition. You know, you're right, and this book is very weird. So it's lovely to see it resonating with another person in this way. So it's just really nice.
Yes, we're very happy for you.
Thank
Yes,
you.
because this will, you know, maybe elevate is not the right word, but this would definitely give you more publicity, you know,
Yes.
and especially you know, the librarians are looking at you and they've already, you know, gave you a Medal of Excellence. So hopefully this means that you're going to be in every single library across the country.
It's really lovely. And I love the librarian. So this is just
Yes, we love
great.
our libraries. We love our
Yeah.
libraries. Tess is a former librarian.
Yay.
Yeah.
Doing all the
Okay,
good
so
stuff, Ted.
so before we leave, tell us, what are you working on now? When can we expect something new?
I ask myself when all the time, so I don't know. But I'm working on two things. I'm always working on at least two things because of the poetry as well. So I'm working on a poetry collection that is about vision and perspective in a metaphorical, but also a very physical sense. And then I'm working on a novel that I'm actually in a fun stage. You know, when you're writing, there's ups and downs, but I'm like in a very fun stage where I'm very having fun with it. I would just say a couple of things that are happening right now. Who knows what is going to be in the end? But the novel has two threads. One is in the Midwest between Chicago and Iowa City, and there's an amnesiac ghost that visits the cars. And then the other thread is in Chicago, and it has to do, there's a photographer who does real estate photography, and it has to do with real estate and mid-century architecture. And these two threads are going to meet to find a way to send the ghost home. So that's kind of what I'm working on right
Very
now.
nice. And then if the devil makes an appearance, you know, that would be
Right? A little cameo. Yeah.
yes, yes. Well, thank you for being with us. We wish you the best of luck. We wish you, you know, lots of success, lots of more medals of excellence.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me. This is great. Thank you.
Comadre Karen?
Gracias, comadres. Our second interview is with Daniel A. Olivas, author of 12 books, including Chicano Frankenstein and My Chicano Heart, New and Collected Stories of Love and Other Transgressions. He is also a playwright, editor, and book critic. Widely anthologized, Olivas has written on literature for the New York Times, Los Angeles Review of Books, Los Angeles Times, Zocalo, Latino Book Review, and the Rumpus. He earned his degree in English literature from Stanford University and law degree from UCLA. By day, he is a senior attorney with the California Department of Justice, specializing in land use and environmental enforcement. Interviewing Daniel is Dr. Rachel Barrera, who was born and raised in the Rio Grande Valley. She became a Comadre member last year. Self-proclaimed collector of anything Jaguar and an avid reader since the 5th grade when she participated in the Pizza Hut Book It reading program that gave you free pizza for reading books. Take it away, Comadre Rachel.
Hi, welcome everybody. Daniel, I'm so excited. We're so excited to have you here today for your wonderful book, Chicano Frankenstein. And we're gonna have a couple questions and then you're gonna grace us with a reading. So
thank you.
first
Thank you for having
question-
me. I just want to, first of all, thank you all for having me, and delighted to listen to Ananda talk about her book. And I have a short story collection from 20 years ago called Devil Talk, published by Bilingual Press. So I love writing about the devil. My devils are male and female, and they do different things because of they have different desires. So
Thank you. So first off, let's start off with if you could share a synopsis of Chicano Frankenstein with us.
sure. I started to write the book in 2022 during the midterm elections, when the anti-immigrant rhetoric got extremely vicious and ugly. And I wanted to address that political rhetoric through a novel. And Frankenstein by Mary Shelley is probably the most famous novel where the concept of the other is explored. And so I reread the novel and listened to it, and over several months I formulated a plot where in my novel, it's in the near future, takes place in Southern California, and there are 12 million reanimated people in the United States. Reanimation is a way for the dwindling population to help keep people working at whatever jobs that they were working in before. And when people are reanimated, they have their histories wiped. They keep their skills. They have their faces and fingerprints changed. And so they are reintroduced into commerce, but they aren't living their prior lives. And my novel follows one main character, an unnamed man, who is a brown-skinned man, some touchstones of Mexican culture, but he's been pretty much wiped. And then he begins to go on his journey to find out who he was. So that's a basic synopsis.
So one of the questions that many of us had is you didn't give the main character, the man, a name. You literally just called him the man, all lowercase. Why did you choose to do that in the novel for this character?
In Mary Shelley's novel, the creature is never named. So when people say Frankenstein, in truth, that refers to the doctor, Dr. Victor Frankenstein, the creator of the creature or the monster. So I wanted to kind of capture that, but also I wanted it to be part of a metaphor for assimilation, for the wiping of identity. And even though the characters know what his name is because they have to interact with him, they're only the reader doesn't know who, what his name is, his new name, because everyone's given a brand new name. And part of his journey in the novel, without giving it away, is to discover what his original name was and who he was in his prior life.
And also about the man, he doesn't blend in like other reanimated people. There's some reanimated people who, it takes a little time for you to realize that they were reanimated. The man is created from different people, and so much so that you could tell quite quickly that he is reanimated and different. So why did you make that choice of making him stand out?
Well, in my novel, the man died in a car accident, and his left arm and leg were badly injured, so they had to replace them in the reanimation process. But they replaced his left arm and leg with different cadavers that are white skinned, so that the moment people see him, they see a white and it's a larger hand and arm. People realize, oh, he's what the people who don't like reanimated people call a stitcher. So he's one of them. He's a stitcher, and so he can never really go through life being just accepted by society. And in many ways, that mirrors how it is to be a brown-skinned person in this country. You know, I was born in the United States. My parents were born in the United States, but I've been stopped by ICE and questioned, wondering where I was born. I've been stopped one time carrying my son when he was little, and my son has blue eyes. My wife is blonde and blue eyes. And I got stopped by security. Excuse me, sir, is that your child? And so just by the very appearance of many of us, people don't consider us to be real Americans. And we see in this current political environment that it's ramping up even more. Just looking at yesterday's New York rally of a certain presidential candidate, attacks on Puerto Ricans and attacks on other Latinos. Again, not accepting us as belonging.
So would you like to introduce the summary of the book you're going to read?
Oh, you mean the passage? Yeah.
Passage.
In the passage I'm going to read, the man has a recurring nightmare. Something about his past keeps on slipping in to his dreams, and he has at this point in the novel, he's fallen in love with a lawyer named Faustina Godinez, and Faustina is a brilliant, feisty partner in a small firm, and he's beginning to not only fall in love with her, but also fall in love with her family and her family's culture. So this little portion is one night when he wakes up. The man sat up. He breathed heavily. A cold sheen of perspiration covered his body. The man looked over upon Faustina, sleeping on her side, facing him, curled into a ball like a cat, and snoring, face half buried in the man's pillow. The sheet had fallen to the floor, and the soft amber light of the corner lamp bathed Faustina's body in a gentle glow. The man softly touched Faustina's skin at her left shoulder and then at her hip, perfectly joined, not a line of rippled scar tissue, simply beautiful brown skin running seamlessly along the contours of her limbs. His breathing slowed as he calmed from the delirium of the nightmare. The man sighed, stood, and walked into the bathroom. He closed the door and turned on the light. He looked in the mirror and considered the differences between Faustina's body and his own. The man slowly ran his fingers across the scar tissue where his left hip and left leg joined. A fairly good match of skin color and even in foot size. His own right foot takes a size 9 medium shoe, but the man could comfortably walk around wearing a 9.5, the size of the foot of his new leg. The man then ran his fingers along the scars where his left arm had been joined at the shoulder. His own right arm and shoulder were, of course, perfect together, but the jarring line of color looked like a children's wooden jigsaw puzzle of the United States, with each state a different color from its neighbor. Couldn't have they found skin that was closer in hue? The brown of his left shoulder stood out against the white of the arm, and his left hand was so much larger than his right. A shocking mismatch. Why? Was it some kind of cruel joke? Did the surgeons and nurses laugh and offer sniggering jibes about the man's patchwork body parts? How could anyone be so cruel as to deny him the modest gift of conformity, that inner peace that springs from ordinariness, an opportunity to simply be only himself and not contain many? He didn't seem to belong anywhere, neither here nor there.
Thank you for reading that. That actually made me cry when I read it the first time. And
Oh,
it's bringing tears to my eyes because, you know, you're a reader and you relate and you bring your own experience, right? And for me, it was about not fitting in as an American and then not fitting in Mexico.
mhm.
Um, and and just the idea of identity and having multiple identities depending on where you are and you know where do you fit in. So in your book and you know you have so many amazing themes. Identity is a big one, belonging is a big one. What do you hope that readers will take away when they read your book and they read about these themes,
Mhm.
other than crying at that passage?
Well, um, first and foremost, I want readers to be entertained. You know, I don't want to write something that's boring, something that's just a political kind of speech. On one level, I hope people enjoy the language I use and the story that I tell. Beyond that, if they're able to sympathize with the man and other characters who are reanimated and understand the pain that's caused when a society treats them as the other or the invader, maybe that can reach hearts. The novel was optioned by a major television studio, and and I'm not really advertising that on Twitter or anything, but it's public knowledge because it's recorded with the Copyright Office, so people can see which studio it is. But you know, I've had conversations about how this could reach the hearts of people, and my hope is that it does. And Also, as a writer, I never like to be bored, and this writing this novel was particularly fun for me. It just came out of me. I explained in my author's note. It came in terms of actual writing. I wrote it in 50 days. And then
Wow.
when it was accepted by the publisher, I eventually added a couple more chapters as we went through it, and I accepted their notes about what needed to be tweaked. But it's you know, it was a story I felt like I had to tell. I had no idea the whole concept that I was addressing, the anti-immigrant um, rhetoric, would be as bad as it was 2 years ago during the midterm
Mhm.
elections. I had absolutely no idea we would be reaching this point, that it would be as bad as it's ever been in my entire life. And I'm 65 years old, so I've seen a lot.
And it's more relevant now more than ever.
Yeah, sadly.
Yeah. So one of the questions coming from one of our attendees, Maria, she says, you use many Spanish words in your novel without a translation. Did your editor and publisher ever complain? Was there any discussion? Were you told, you know, not to use foreign words without a translation? Personally, I felt they were very natural. I didn't think that they were like inserted, oh, we need a Spanish word here. Felt very natural to me when those words, oh, Spanish came up.
Yeah, I struggle with Spanish because when I was young, a doctor told my parents to cut all Spanish in the house. So I consider Spanish to be very important in terms of how some of my characters speak. And my publisher never, Fourth Avenue Press and Laura Stanfill, who's the publisher at the press, never said I needed to put translations in, and I don't italicize Spanish either. You know, I've read books by great American authors, where, French phrases are used, and they're not translated, you know. And these days it's very easy just to quickly Google a phrase. But I try to use Spanish in such a way that gives a flavor of the way that people communicate, but also that fits within the narrative so that it's more or less understandable, even if you don't speak any, a word of Spanish.
Well, I think one universal language is food. And
Yes.
you mentioned different foods, pan dulce and others, but in particular, I believe it's Faustina who makes chilaquiles. Uh, can you share why you chose that particular dish to include in the novel?
Yeah, there's a scene where she's teaching the man how to cook chilaquiles, and it's a dish that her family likes to eat, and they're going to have a family gathering. My late father used to cook it when my mom wasn't feeling well and the five kids had to eat. It was his go-to dish, and it's a good way to feed a lot of kids. And there's something, my mouth is watering as I'm thinking about this. There's something very wonderful about foods that can bring back memories. And so that's one of the things that occurs with the man, where there's certain smells and foods that begin to bring back memories that had been erased and wiped. And there's something very beautiful about the food of my culture that that just makes me incredibly happy. I mean, there's certain things that just remind me of my grandmother, for example. She used to make lengua and mole with little potatoes. It was so wonderful. And whenever I have something like that, I think of my grandmother who passed, about 40 years ago.
Yeah.
So food is elemental to my characters, and actually most of my I hadn't realized a lot of my fiction includes food and coffee too. Coffee is a major beverage.
Wonderful. Yes, I also remembered. I'm sure many of us were reading that. We're thinking of all the other foods that remember us at home, of our parents, of our family gatherings. Um, so one of the questions that came in was why do you choose to name the novel Chicano Frankenstein, as instead of like Mexican Frankenstein or
Mhm.
American Frankenstein, or any, Chicano was what you used.
Well, the the doctor in the novel is in fact Chicano, and he's very much connected to his culture, and he actually has a cat named Quetzalcoatl, which is one of the great Aztec gods, um, and he's sort of like a radical from the '60s. He's and very, very proud of who he is. My father used the term Chicano to describe himself. I use that term. When I was at UCLA, I was editor-in-chief of the Chicano Law Review. Um, and so it's just something that I thought fit with the story I was trying to tell. And yes, it's very specific, but that's okay because you can tell very universal stories by being very specific. When I remember reading Joy Luck Club by Amy Tan. Um, even though I'm not Chinese, I connected with so many of the characters in the dynamics by connecting it to my own upbringing within my family. So I think it's okay to be very specific, and we're all people. My characters fall in love, they get angry, they do this and that. They they do all the same things that everyone does at one point or another in their lives.
Yes. And there's also art. There's sculptures in here where,
Mhm.
we talk about art as being, part of, creating humanity, God, creation, all of that's related. And in the novel, when the man saw the walking man sculpture, he cried. Can you talk a little bit more about the significance of that piece of art and how the man may have related to that particular sculpture?
Sure. So there's a scene where they go on their first date, Faustina and the man, and they go to the Norton Simon Museum. and that's in Pasadena. And in front of the museum, there are these beautiful Rodin sculptures, 5 or 6 of them. And one of them is the Walking Man, which is a headless man, and no arms, and but there's a torso and legs. And history tells us that Rodin mixed different pieces and kind of cobbled together this structure that became one of his most famous sculptures. And the man could relate. He could relate to that sculpture, but he wondered why it was missing limbs. And the woman Faustina says to him, "Well, isn't it perfect as it is?" And he thinks about this, and he begins to think about himself, because he throughout the novel, he is struggling with his physicality. And I think most of us struggle with our physical aspect in different ways. Um, and it is an important thing, I think, for people to realize that, um, we are beautiful. We might not be, we might not look like a movie star, the perfect movie star who's airbrushed. Um, but there's beauty in all our forms. And in my novel, the man is beginning to realize, yeah, maybe I am beautiful, as I am.
A piece of art, essentially.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Part of the writing in the novel, you also include these news briefs and interviews. What do these factual documents do you think add to the story, add to the tension of the novel and where it's going?
Right. So my novel is interspersed with like transcripts from CNN interview with a right-wing president named Mary Beth Cadwallader, who is amping up the anti-Stitcher rhetoric. Her mantra is "Make America Safe Again," or MASA. And and so I have other transcripts where she's plotting with her communications people to to really go after the reanimated population to drum up her numbers in the midterm elections. And so I wanted the novel to play on 2 different planes: on the very personal, where the man is maneuvering through the world and beginning to fall in love and really beginning to search for who he was, and then on the macro level, the level of the political side of it, with the talking heads on cable TV and president plotting her avenue to get even more power. And my hope is that if it does in fact become a television series, um, that tension can be played out, where we'll be able to see the news and political stuff happening on one level, but following the man's journey on the more basic level.
Yeah, I think that works really well in building the tension, the politics of it, and where he is at or not at. Also, we're coming to the end of our interview, so you've mentioned getting options, you've mentioned rights, you've mentioned maybe TV series, um, and also some of the questions that came in is there's going to be a sequel, is there going to be a Chicana Frankenstein? Can you give us some future forecasts of what's happening with this novel and any other works or ideas that you have?
Yes. Well, first of all, just to note that the book, in a sense, a sequel came out in the Spanish edition that just came out October 1st. So we're very excited about that. But in terms of a sequel, I am in talking with the television studio. um, I've already kind of spun out some ideas about where the novel will go. So I'm thinking of perhaps a sequel, but I've already started a different novel called Chicana Werewolf. And it's within the same universe of these monsters, which were made famous by Universal Studios. And I I want to address in that novel. I'm addressing the question or issue of addiction, um, So it's going to be a little less political. There's some politics, but not much. It's more personal with the main character. So I'm working on that. I'm just about 15 or 20,000 words into it. So but I'm very excited about it. I like where the characters are going. So we'll see what happens.
And that's going to be called Chicano Werewolf.
Yes.
Nice. So I don't see any other last minute questions in the chat. So I really want to thank you for everything and all that you have shared with us. It's a wonderful novel. And we look clearly maybe on TV or in the movies. We're going to get to see hopefully more of what your work and the novel and what you're doing. It's all very exciting. Congratulations on everything. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Rachel, and thank you to Las Comadres for inviting me. Really fun, and I'm just delighted being with Ananda, who is a rising star. Very excited.
Well, you all have absolutely filled my head with all kinds of interesting things to dream about tonight. And, you know, the devil has many faces, and the man experiences transformations in its many faces, and the human level in transcendence is throughout. Thank you so much for adding those challenges to our thinking. Our thanks to our authors and their publishers, Tor Books and Forest Avenue Press, for their generous donation of books to our early registrants. Thank you as well to our interviewers, Comadre Maria Ferrer and Rachel Barrera. We thank our audience for taking the time to join us tonight, and to those who submitted questions, and would also like to thank all our volunteers, without whom this book club and all the associated work would not happen. Mil gracias. Please remember to support our authors by writing a review of their books on sites like Amazon, Goodreads, Barnes & Noble. We also have examples of how to write these reviews if you're worried about doing it right. Go on our Latino Lit website and you'll find some things to look at. Those reviews carry weight with the publishers as well as with other readers. Buy books to support our authors, and if your library doesn't have a book you want, ask them to order it. And please attend our virtual local book club meetings and bring a friend or two. Remember, our book club is open to men and women, Latinos and non-Latinos. All are welcome. Our November books are Abuelita's Magical Molcajete by Mole Mama, and the Salvisol Cookbook, Salvadoran Recipes and the Women Who Preserve Them by Carla Tatiana Vasquez. Again, thank you all for your continued support of our book club and Latino literature. And please join us in celebrating Las Comadres and Friends National Latino Book Club throughout the year by buying books and supporting Latino authors. Buenas noches.